Hi, fam. Welcome to the Faith and Fandom podcast. This is Hector Mirai, and today we're continuing with our series. So I'm finally watching The Chosen. Today we're going to be talking about The Chosen Season 2, Episodes 4 and 5, specifically focusing around the paralytic man at the pools, Simon the Zealot, and John the Baptist. So, first off, this is a story that I've been familiar with, the paralytic man at the pools, like my Christian life. But it's never seemed like a big game changer in terms of the setting of it. I've never really thought more about this man's life than what, it took to know that he needed a miracle. So the fact that they actually gave us such a deep backstory for this guy and then also tied it to Simon the Zealot was just really, really good. And to give us such a solid life of what it would look like growing up in that position and how hopeless that scenario is, but also it gives us a really good perspective of when we're desperate and it feels like when we trust God, things don't happen the way we think they should, how easy it is to turn to other things, the way that, he turned to a pagan pool or a pagan ritual or anything like that. And the reality is most of us aren't any different, that we're looking for something that's going to give us more immediate answers and healing on a faster pace. But, it's a big deal to actually think of the backstories when we're reading scripture and we're listening to things, to actually realize that these people had much bigger lives than we understood just from what we saw on the screen in those capacities and what we saw in print in those capacities. One of the lines, though, that really just stood out to me, it was just funny, of these people are hungry for the word and I'm hungry for breakfast. Y'all, the reality that ministry is done by people and people have practical needs, it's just a real thing. Let's just say this. Talking about Simon the Zealot, though, my entire life, when I'm talking about Simon the Zealot, or when I've read about Simon the Zealot, I pictured Simon the Zealot as just somebody a little more excitable, a little more hyperactive, like zealous, like he's just, he's a little extra, like he's the guy that wants to do too many crafts at VBS or something. Not that he was a freaking terrorist or an assassin. I just never put that thought combination together, but I get it, and that makes a lot more sense. So knowing that not only was Peter quick with a sword, that you could have potentially had somebody that literally was like freaking Assassin's Creed up in the disciples, it makes for some interesting conversations around a campfire nonetheless. So giving us a good perspective on Simon the Zealot is a solid endeavor, and I did enjoy that. And so I think that's pretty interesting with that. And also the fact that how many times I've heard the Feast of Tabernacles before and never realized how intricate and detailed of a thing it was, and how much work that would take, and what it was like for all of these people to actually have to live in little booths and stuff for that capacity. That, we don't do enough stuff as, modern day Protestant Christian believers to actually really put ourselves in those shoes. And, I was even thinking about today as I'm recording this, it's Mardi Gras. Like, so tomorrow is Ash Wednesday. And like, I've just had on my mind, it's just like, I'm going to see a lot of my Catholic friends and more Catholic leaning friends doing their Ash Wednesday stuff tomorrow. And I'm just like, we don't do enough to remind ourselves about what we come from, even spiritually. I know we're not all Israelites, but we come from a spiritual history. But anyway, the Feast of Tabernacles really kind of put that in my mind as well. I really did love the line where it said that everyone has wandered in the wilderness at some point. Just because we're not Jews that wandered in the wilderness, we have all wandered in the wilderness at some point, and that really, really hit home. One of the things that hit me hardest, and I kind of wished they lingered on it a little bit longer, was when Jesus was walking into the city and he was walking past people being crucified. That was a hard moment. That was a good moment, but I would have liked a little more over dramatic representation of that, but still, that moment was very powerful all on its own. And when Jesus walked up to Jesse, the paralytic man, and he shalomed him, he said, "Shalom me." Like, I could see that on a T-shirt, like or on a first-time greeter at a church, "Shalom me." But when he said, "I've just had a bad day for a long time," I thought that was really really thing and a really big thing. He's like not asking you who's helping you, who's not helping you, who's getting in the, he's saying who's getting in the way. Um, Sometimes we get so caught up in our struggles that we legitimately don't see when God is trying to move in our lives. And for Jesse, he had been so dependent so long on trying to make things happen a certain way that it was hard for him to see what that was. And, you know, this was the famous take up your mat and walk thing in this capacity, and that he did it on the Sabbath. But I really did love the disciples' question as they were walking out of the town at the end of the episode. Is like, Jesus, I know you weren't in a hurry. You could have waited 45 minutes. It wouldn't have been Sabbath. And then nobody would have had beef with it. And for Jesus to make up, or not to make up, for Jesus to make the phrase, sometimes you got to trouble the water. You got to stir up the water. That was great. And I also 100% know that ties into the Jars of Clay song, or not the Jars of Clay, but the Dan Hasseltine song Trouble that's on the Chosen soundtrack, and fits very well with the theme song of the Chosen. So I get it. It was a smooth line, and it's like a throwback, a wink at the camera of what they're doing with their own theme song and everything else. But I just thought it was a really solid episode, really good representation, and yeah, just thought it was cool. So going on to episode 5, as we see Mary picking up apples and being afraid of the Roman guards and everything else. And the fact she was trying to learn her scripture, but that when she saw something that actually made her fearful, rather than trusting in the scripture that she had, she ended up crumpling it up. And, I think that's very representative of all of us, that we can know all the right words, we can have all the right things to say, that it doesn't mean that when we're faced with struggles and we're faced with trials and we're faced with things that make us fearful, that we're not going to crumble in that moment. So I really appreciated that. Second thing that really stood out to me just with this is that spy dude is good at his job. He reminds me an awful lot of like the investigator from Les Mis, literary and musical reference there, but the spy guy just seems to really be on his game. How he worked with Jesse, how he did all this stuff and everything. He just seems like a really good detective. I'm enjoying him as his role in this. And then let's just get back to say that Simon the Zealot literally looks like you're in a training montage for Assassin's Creed. Like, you just got your blade and now you need to learn how to use it, and he's out there like doing ninja junk in the woods, and I'm like, this dude's literally one hood away from playing Assassin's Creed, but it's whatever. We get the demon possessed man with the 7 demons in him walking up, and let me just say, kudos to them, because they made a demon possessed dude in the daylight just walking out in the field effectively creepy. Like, I get it. You could stage this at night and make it lit dark, and you could present it even more cinematically in a dark fashion. But they managed to make a dude walking around in a robe in the daylight creepy. Just well done on the portrayal of that. So I think that was really neat, and how they did that as well. So one of the things that just hit me since I've seen John the Baptist in, I guess, season one uh, or two, wherever it was before, I feel like John the Baptist's portrayal and some of his dialogue feels like Fred Armisten's portrayal of Uncle Fester in the Wednesday show on Netflix. Just throwing that out there. Also, John's beard needs work. I get it. He's scraggly. He in the wilderness. It's cool. It's cool. But his beard needs work. But yeah, John the Baptist reminds me a little bit of Uncle Fester in that capacity. Um, I really loved Jesus's statement when he was arguing or discussing with John at the river, where he said he's here for bigger things than breaking rules. And y'all, that just cried out to my heart, because it's easy for us, especially when we're righteous or self-righteous, to want to just go after people breaking rules. But Jesus said he's here for bigger things than breaking rules. But he was almost calling Jesus a coward for running and not standing and fighting. He just wants to know when he was going to get to work, and I get that. But also when Jesus said calling them a brood of vipers was classy, I I wish there was more scripture, or there was any scripture where Jesus just looked at the disciples and were like, real classy guys, real classy. I get it. Jesus doesn't need to be a character from The Office, but it made me giggle. So that was one thing. Also, in John the Baptist's rant about David, he mentioned that David died in bed with a woman, a teenager that wasn't his wife. And this references back to, if you've ever heard me talk about David, and I've mentioned this in some, I spoke at the Uncommon group online last month, I think, or earlier this month, and yeah, it was last month, and I mentioned this in one of the story that I taught, was that there's a portion in the Old Testament where David had a human Snuggie, where David, when he was older, would get cold very frequently. And the way that they went around that was by having a young woman lay on top of David just to keep him warm. It wasn't in a sexual manner, but it was in a super awkward manner, and it got tied into weird family relations. And the fact that John the Baptist was annoyed about that is 100% accurate and beautiful, because I feel like that's the type of thing that John the Baptist would have judged David for. And it's one of these rare, obscure Bible stories that always makes me giggle, and I love it. So I just love that he was annoyed by it. But John saying the phrase, or Jesus as well, that, they've known about this stuff since the songs and the prophecies and everything else, but it's just heavy when it becomes real. And for Jesus to say that he's always ready to do the will of his Father, but that doesn't make it easy. Y'all, feel it in my bones. Now, I'm not saying I have like empathy or sympathy, or that, I'm more Christ-like than anything like that, because I know I'm not. But I feel that. Because I always feel like I want to do the right thing, but it doesn't make it easy. It's like the Mumford & Sons line, I'm a cab, but I'm not a fraud. I set out to serve the Lord. But yeah. And then, so before they even played the music, or you heard the sounds or whatever, when Mary was in the tent with Rama working on the scriptures, and her head started hurting, I yelled out in my house, is she having demon spider sense? Can she tell a demon's near? And the fact that they did that, I thought was super dope. I thought that was good storytelling. I don't know that that's remotely biblically accurate, but that's really cool. And I'm really excited about it, and I loved it. And I think that's really, really freaking awesome. So yeah, I just thought that was really cool. I thought that how the demon was cast out, with Jesus just like at the buzzer from the 3-throw line, like he just yelled at him from a distance and cast him out. I thought that was really cool. But then when John got to see the demon cast out, And after everybody's in this tense moment, and John just goes, "Yeah!" Um, I thought that was great. And it literally, because he's a small human, I was like, look, it's little John. And he just yelled, "Yeah!" I just thought that was great. I thought it was great. Um, oh, and also the line where Jesus said that it's not so easy with distracted humans. That when you're trying to lead, when you're trying to guide, when you're trying to do the right things, it's really, really hard to do when people are distracted, and I feel that to my core. Um, and for telling Simon the Zealot, I don't need you. I have everything I need. But wanting you by my side needs to be enough. That no one buys their way into the group. I just, again, so after I did the last podcast, my friend Chrissy called me to tell me that, because one of the things I stated in the last one was that it was the first time it hit me that the show's not about Jesus, the show's about the disciples, because it's called The Chosen, because it's about the ones that he picked. She called me to tell me that she'd already watched all of it, like more than I've watched, and it didn't hit her. But y'all, it really is about who he's picking and how he's picking, so I'm excited about that. Now, last thing I'll say about this, and I am still loving the whole experience, and I'm just kind of sad that I'm waiting to watch this episode with each one with my family. Because now I love family time. I think that's great. But if I wasn't watching this with my family, I would have been done by now. And I would have seen stuff in theaters. But I digress. This is the first episode, and y'all may have watched more of them or whatever. But you know how normally, like, we get to credits, we cut off. Did y'all know, and there may be more, again, this is just the first one I saw it, that there is stuff after the credits? Like, I got to the end of episode 5, and there were bloopers after the credits. Like, of when Simon the Zealot's doing his martial arts stuff, one of the crew comes and, like, drop kicks him. Or a dude walks up behind Jesus and John to say that they're done. And then there's just, like, little goofy post-credit stuff. I didn't know that. So that's just bananas. So I think that's super cool that that exists like that. And so yeah, I just think that's neat. Before I bounce out, I just want to go ahead and give a shout out to our Patreon supporters. Because our Patreon supporters help make everything we do possible. And I'm grateful for them. So let me give a shout out to our Patreon supporters. We've got Scott Ward. Scott Ward is a new Patreon supporter. So thank you, homie. I really, really appreciate that. Alicia Benson, Candace Davis, Jay Shee, Jillian, Jason Crutchfield, Michelle. Oh, man. Hold on 1 second. I am going to shift that over. Just a little sad moment. Michelle is one of our former Patreon supporters, and she passed away. And I didn't have the active list clicked. That makes me sad. Anyway, Scott Ward, Alicia, Candace Davis, Jay Shield, Jillian, Jason Crutchfield, Mike Perna, Todd Turner, John Jacobs, Zach Harris, Caleb Grimm, Jeanette Skaggs, Chris Poirier, Jason Bullock, Christina Ray, Sarah Lewis, Patrick Gale, Rebecca Godlove, and Adam Davis. Thank you all so much for being Patreon supporters and making your contributions help Faith and Fandom go. And we're about to head out to our first con this weekend of 2023 and kind of hit the ground rolling. So thank you for listening. I hope you've enjoyed our commentary on The Chosen. And if you've got some insight or commentary with this, let me know. And I'll just also say this. I haven't watched episode 6 yet, but I kind of think that when Mary went rogue and she went into the city of Jericho and everything else, I think she's using her money or whatever to buy a scroll of scripture that she can read. That's my guess. Just guessing here. Okay, peace out.